We are back for the third installment in our Requiem series. We've got another movement, another comedically large score, and lots of drama. We're looking at the Dies Irae. The Dies Irae is a very long text. It's a serious text. You know, we are capturing the drama of the finality of death in this movement. So on that note, let's dive into the AI demo of the piece before getting on to some discussion about my compositional process here.
Dies Irae, Dies Irae, Dies Irae, Dies illa solvet saeculum in favilla, Deste David cum sibilla, quantus tremores futurus, quando iudex est venturus, conta stricte discussarus. Tu mia spargens sonum per sepulcra regimum, cocetum de sancte tronum, mors tu verite natura, cum resurgit creatura, iudicanti responsera, liber scriptus proferetur, in quotatum continetur, unde mundus iudicetur, iudex servo cum severvit, quid latet apparevit, quid latet apparevit, rex tremende majestatus, qui salvando salvas gratis salve fons pietatis. Sus revedisti, crucem passus revedisti, crucem passus, tantus labor non sit casus, juste iudex utionis, juste iudex utionis, ante diem rationis, Gemis coram reus, culpa rubret vultus meus, supplicanti parce Deus, Maria absolvisti, et latrone exaudisti, nimoque spempedisti preces me, non sunt fides et tuolus ad venire credere, interotes locum presta, et aleges me sequestra, statuens in parte destra. Confutatis maledictis, flammis atribus addictis, flammis atribus addictis, oro supplex et alcinis, cor contritum pasicinis, coram mei fine.
All right, so that was the AI demo of our Dies Irae. Compared to other AI demos I've made, towards the end, the alto line I think got out of sync a little bit, but c'est la vie, right? Like these aren't perfect, but it does offer a great picture of what the piece would actually, what it would actually sound like. The Dies Irae, massively long text. So the Dies Irae text is a sequence, and sequences were poems written in the early Latin church, about, sort of like a hymn, sort of like hymns. They were written in Latin, we're talking, 700s, 600s, AD. And there were lots of them, but then when they started to standardize, with the Gregorian chant under Pope Gregory, they got rid of a lot of the sequences. But the Dies Irae is one that they kept, and they kept it in the Requiem Mass. The other notable sequence, I guess, is the Stabat Mater. This one that, for people who are, familiar with choral repertoire, or like traditional choral repertoire, they've probably heard of or seen a Stabat Mater before. So the thing that's interesting, I guess, about the Dies Irae is that it can be set, and is often set, as a single work, right? So composers will just go and write a Dies Irae, right? But I wanted to include the Dies Irae because it is a really kind of dramatic text. Like the subject matter of this text, offers up a nice contrast to some of the more sorrowful notes that we've had in, that will have to come, and we've had in previous movements of this Requiem. So I wanted to include the Dies Irae, but it's a difficult text to set in that essentially each of the, there are stanzas, if you will, and each stanza has 3 lines that roughly rhyme with each other but are not metrically similar. So, we have a rough structure to follow, like to think of threes, but there's going to have to be a fair amount of through composition, setting the Dies Irae like this in a movement of a larger Requiem, right? It might be a bit of a different story if we were setting this text as its own separate work, right? You could repeat a lot of the text and do different things with it, but really we need to get through a lot of text in a reasonable amount of time, right? Like I wanted this movement to be 4 to 5 minutes long, so there's a little bit of text repetition, but it's really limited. So essentially what I've gone and done is I've done a lot of, no pun intended, sequences within the Dies Irae sequence. So we start off here with this Dies Irae, slower rhythm in the choral parts, whereas the orchestras, the strings are, creating this sort of chaotic underbelly of the thing. It's sounding decently classical thus far, and then, I did a bit of a post-tonal moment down at the bottom because, I normally don't do that sort of thing, but it suited the text, right? We're going for chaos. So, some of the harmonies down here happening in the strings, we're dealing with some really ugly consecutive chords that, they'll be able to play, but, I wouldn't want to have to sing that these parts down here. We're going for a chant vibe, and what that does is, where these texts are not metrically similar, it enables us to create musical ideas that can tie together more easily. So there are a fair number of time changes in this, but they don't sound, I guess, like a syncopated or an odd type of rhythmic thing going on. It's more that I had to make a few time changes to suit the text, to set it up to do chants. So we have this loud moment here with this massive organ chord and this sort of chanted thing going on in the other parts, and then at the end of that phrase, so this is really the end of our like second stanza in the piece. So really just we have to burn through text in this, which is honestly really contrary to what we've done so far, right? With the Introit, the Kyrie, the Requiem Aeterna, and the fourth movement of this piece, we really repeated text a lot, and we're trying to make the most out of text. The opposite is going on here. We're trying to just like cook through this. So I guess our second sort of musical theme, and it's a really rough theme, right? There isn't really a structure to this other than I try to keep musical ideas in threes with regard to the text. So, we've got this tura mirum spargensorum persepulcra regionum, right? So that rhymes, right? Sorum onum. So we kept the musical idea roughly the same, like the same sort of style and vibe here. And I tried to do that throughout the piece, but the next thing that comes after it doesn't really have anything to do with this musical idea. Then we're back to a louder sort of dynamic away from our staccato thing that we had going on, more similar to what was happening in the beginning of the piece. And as I said, you can see these sort of time changes. That wasn't because I was thinking, I'm going to be cool and put in a 5/4 time. It just made the most sense with the accent of the text. So it goes along like this for quite some time. Then on the, when we get to this Rex Tremende Majestatus, we get here, and I bring the choir into almost an accompaniment role, right? We're giving them a little bit of a break because they've been going, this choir's been going like a bat out of hell since the beginning of it, which is, what I was going for. That was very intentional. We wanted to have the loudness, the chaos, the drama happening in the choral parts. But now what I've done is that we've given them a bit of a break, but to keep that up, we've, given some interest to the strings. Then over the page, we've got a little bit of an organ and strings interlude, which again, it's really to give the choir a break. And we come back to this sort of staccato on-off beat thing going on here. Then we introduce a new idea. Right. Harmonically similar. One of the things that I've done throughout this piece is there's some very extraneous modulations, but they're done from, essentially, if we think of the tonic chord, right, as being like 1, 3, and 5, I'll modulate in the minor, right? So a 1 flat, 3, and 5. What I'll do is I'll make it so that tonic becomes the minor third of the next chord that we're doing, right? So, you'd be going, you can do some really, really dark, Harry Potter sounding modulations that way. So say, for example, we're in C minor here. If you had a C minor, you've got a C, an E flat, and a G. We would go and modulate to A minor from there. So you'd have an A, a C, and an E, which is fairly chromatic, but it's chromatic, but it's smooth. Right? So from a voice leading perspective, it's a really easy thing to sing and a really easy thing to hear, but it doesn't sound quite right. And that's something harmonically that I've done throughout this piece to create that sense of drama and lack of stillness in the thing, right? Because, we're singing about, I don't remember all of the Latin off the top of my head for the Dies Irae. I am an Anglican, so we don't do very much Latin in church from my perspective, which reminds me to reiterate that from our perspective, this is a secular work, right? This is not designed to be sung in church. This is a concert work, kind of like a lot of requiems are done as concert works, right? They're done on a stage rather than in the church, right? So that's really what we're doing with this piece. And then we bring in this syncopated, this is a really similar musical idea to what we had when the choir, like harmonically, when we think of the harmonies, when we think of the intervals, this is a really similar musical idea to what we had when they were more, when they were more sustained, right? When they were singing those half notes a few pages over. But it's just on the offbeat with a bit of a syncopation going on. It kind of creates this, this exciting rhythm that we want to get, right? Where this is a really supposed to be a big and dramatic piece, and I think that that rhythmic type of thing really helps to hit that home, especially introduced as a new idea throughout the middle of the piece. And really, over the next 2 pages, we're kind of just going, burning through this text, thinking about everything in threes. We pull back a little bit here for the Tantus labor non sit casus, and you can see down here you have oris, casus, iudex, how does this end over here? Onis, right? So you've got sort of a section of 3 parts that rhyme. So you can have one idea, a second similar idea, a third similar idea, and then on to something new. And I've kind of just run with that structure, thinking of each of those stanzas as little chunks. But what I would do is I would bring back some of the chunks, I guess, if you will, some of those, 3 stanza musical idea or 3 line stanza musical ideas. I bring back almost verbatim in different keys. throughout this to create a sense of unity. Because the danger of something like this is just going and going and going and not finding ways to have the piece hang together. And, you know, that's a really quick way to writing a chaotic piece, you know, and not the type of chaos that we want to portray, just the type of chaos that people can't follow or get interested in. And so we really just go on with this for a few pages, right? But again, remember, it might seem like I'm flipping pages and not talking about things here, but are at a faster tempo than the other movements we've looked at, and a lot of the musical ideas are repeated, right? Even though we do need to go and go and go, and it is through composed, right? Like where I've been replacing or reusing a lot of the musical ideas when I come to new stanzas. You know, we don't necessarily need to say which one every time we run into it. So what I do here, without even touching the dynamics, we can start to bring things down, you know, by changing the tempo, right? So we don't have a writ, you know, I haven't written in a writ, and I'm not gonna write in a writ, but we start, you know, a page or two back to have more sustained organ and strings parts, and that kind of starts to bring down the drama into a final, you know, to build up for that final moment, for that final cadence. You know, and we go back, we lean in on the chant here, on the chant ideas, over these sort of, you know, more of a wash type of strings and organ parts. And, you know, we're building up here. You know, well, I'd say we're building up in terms of intensity, but coming down in terms of dynamic, and in terms of rhythmic complexity. But we're really, you know, pushing into this, this finis right here. Right? And I mean, it's the end, right? We're singing about death. We're coming down. We're dying away. And then after this, we'll have, you know, the more sorrowful, sentimental movement in the Lacrimosa that will follow this. All right, so that was the Dies Irae. I hope you enjoyed the piece and learned something from the discussion we've had here. The next movement we're going to look at in a video like this is the Lacrimosa, which that text also comes from the Dies Irae. It's the last two stanzas of the Dies Irae, so we'll be looking at that in the next video. If you've enjoyed the piece or learned something from the discussion, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay tuned to my other compositional work coming out on this channel.